Hello YouTube, Sidekick here in my trusty AV8B Harrier with just a short video, continuing on the theme that we started in the last episode, basically of toss bombing. In the last episode, Scavenger showed us how to use the precision INS mode to do toss bombing in the Mirage 2000. Well, there are a few other aircraft that will actually allow you to do toss bombing, although in DCS at least, the Mirage 2000 of that generation of aircraft is probably the most sophisticated in the way that it handles it. One of the other aircraft that you can obviously do toss bombing in is the Harrier. In the real Harrier, there is a loft bombing mode that would give you the same kind of assistance as the PI mode does in the Mirage, but it's not functional in DCS, which doesn't mean we can't do loft bombing. We just can't use all of the cues that are present in the real aircraft. So today what I wanted to do was essentially repeat what Scavenger did in the last video and actually set up the toss bombing approach right in the cockpit and then go out and fly it and see how our results compare to that, not just in terms of accuracy but also in terms of standoff distance and that sort of thing. So we're here in the Harrier cockpit and we're just going to go right to the F10 map and get ourselves set up. Now our setup is going to be a little bit different than it was in the Mirage, because in the Mirage you actually pick an INS registration point and then you set an offset to take you to the target. Don't need to do that in the Harrier. So basically what I'm going to do is set up to have, first of all, an initial point that would have been where the INS registration point was in the last video, and then the target. And we won't have to use those exactly the way we did in the Mirage 2000, but it's still useful to have the two to get yourself lined up. So take a look at where the initial point is, and then we'll take a look at where the target is, and I'm just writing these numbers down. Now you'll notice that I'm not getting the target location in lat and long coordinates. We're actually going to use UTM coordinates. It's just an interesting thing to show you how you can actually do that in the Harrier. So to put in a new waypoint, we hit the data button. We go up, make sure we've got a waypoint selected on the ODU. We hit a new waypoint number and we get a star. We've done all that. We're putting in number 2 now. I'm checking my list here. Then we click position, then we click UTM, which I just did. Now we're putting in the 10-figure grid reference in UTM coordinates. And that is our waypoint added. Now we go return, and we'll put in the elevation, which is 52 feet, and we'll also add that. And we just need to repeat the process. So go to waypoint, we're going to hit a 3 this time, because we're going to add the third waypoint. This is the target waypoint. Number 2 was our initial point. Hit position, hit UTM, check at what our coordinates are, and just punch those in to the upfront controller here. 10-figure grid reference, good to 1 meter. And we enter that and return, and then we go to elevation, and the target elevation is 18. Okay, so all of our data is now in the computer, and we can do a quick check here. We can cycle through the waypoints and actually look at the map and make sure, let's get it set up here, but actually make sure that it looks like the targets are in the right place. And it does. There's the IP, there's the target. Everything looks good, so we can get rolling and talk about how we're actually going to do this. And just one final check on a slightly higher scale here. Yeah, that looks good. So we're going to go out and see how we can do toss bombing in the Harrier. Okay, so we're getting out to the runway here. We'll get ourselves lined up and then take off, and then I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to run this here practice. We're going to do like Scavenger did in the last video. And by the way, if you haven't watched that video, you should, because it does talk a little bit about the whole principle of toss bombing, so it's worth taking a look at. At any rate, we're going to go up and we're going to turn to the left to give us a little bit of distance between us and our initial point. And then we're going to start our run from there. So just final checks, make sure everything's good, and we're down the runway. And we'll do a variable nozzle takeoff here. Once we get up fast enough, pull the nozzles back to 60, off the ground, and then we'll get the gear up and the nozzles forward. So as I was saying, we're going to go out and do a left turn and come around. we're going to use the initial point to basically make sure we're aimed in more or less the right direction, and then we'll actually increment the waypoint to the target as soon as we feel like we're lined up. We don't need to fly exactly over the initial point like Scavenger did, because in the case of the Mirage 2000, you're actually using the initial point to register the INS system, which we're not going to do. So we're just getting fenced in here. We're carrying 4 Mark 82 bombs. One of the things with the Harriers, because it's not quite as fast as the Mirage 2000, you really do want to, if you're going to do toss bombing, you want to keep the load fairly light. Otherwise, it's hard to build up enough speed to do it effectively. So just taking a look at our waypoints again, making sure that we're all set up. Now you will notice that on the stores page, it does have a loft button, which if we were in the real aircraft, we could press that, and then what that would do is it would give us cues as we approach the target to tell us when to pull up and how hard, as well as a cue for when to release the bombs. If we do this without the loft mode, if we just do this in plain old auto mode, we'll still get a cue about when to release the bombs, but we'll be responsible for flying the pull-up basically manually. Now, the recommended pull-up is to start at around 3.8 nautical miles to pull up at 4G to 38 degrees and then wait for the release cue. So we'll try to follow that fairly carefully. I won't guarantee that we'll get it exactly, though. But none of that really affects the accuracy of the bombing. It's just that that is what will give you the best results probably in terms of standoff. So that's how the Marine Corps trains. So we'll try to duplicate that if we can, but I'm not too worried about getting it exactly right. So I'm just staying a little bit to the right of the IP because I know I need to come at it more or less due north to be lined up on the target. So now I'm going to get pointed at the target. I'm going to clear my low altitude warning. Then I'm going to increment the waypoint, and I'm going to press designate. So now I have a target, I have it designated, and at this point it's really just a matter of staying low, staying fast. We're maxed out here, and watching the distance to target click down, and when it's a shade under 4 nautical miles, I'm going to pull back at what I hope is something like 4G, and then I'm going to wait for the release cue to come up. And when I see the release cue, I'm going to unload the back pressure so we're not confusing the computer by having extra G's, and I'm going to press the pickle button, and I'm just going to wait for the bombs to go. It's getting close now, down to 5 nautical miles, just about right here, and up. There's the cue, hold, there they go, bomb's gone. So let's again, if we were doing this tactically, we would have broken down and away from the target to retain that standoff, but you know, we just want to see where the bombs go, so we're going to watch. Again, our target is obviously the big circle down there, the one that we always use. And so we'll wait and see where the bombs land, and then we'll also wait for the target information tracking script to tell us things like not only the accuracy of the bombs, which, well, it's fairly obvious that was a pretty good drop, so we don't need to be told that, but it would be useful to know just exactly what our standoff was, for instance, so that we can compare that to the results that Scavenger got in the last video. To remind you, he was getting a standoff of almost 7 kilometers. With the Mirage. I don't think we'll do that well in the Harrier, and no, in fact, we don't. Although we still managed to get a standoff distance of almost 6 kilometers, which is a pretty fair result. We didn't get exactly 38 degrees in terms of the release angle, but we were close. So I think that was a pretty fair test of toss bombing in the Harrier. Let me know what you think, or if you have your own tips and tricks with regard to that. And tune in for the next one of these where we'll take a look at tossing bombs with the Vigan. For now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.